Right, so last year I said I would start a Q&A, and I've got loads of questions here for this, so I'm going to go straight in. If you want to ask questions, then feel free. Just ask them in the description down below. I don't really mind what sort of questions people ask. So if I got something useful to say, then I'm quite happy to answer questions on any topic. Right. So Martin asks, growing year round indoors, surely bush varieties like Tumble and Profusion are candidates for indoor growing using LED grow lights in winter, maybe in a warmer conservatory. Have you tried? Thoughts either way. So I've kind of tried. I'm pretty confident that it wouldn't succeed for me. It wouldn't be cost effective. The plants wouldn't look very nice. They wouldn't be very healthy. There's quite a significant chance that end up with aphids and things like that. You'd need sort of quite intense LED setup, and I don't really have a high intensity sort of LED setup. I have got my LEDs set up horizontally with trays underneath them. And even a bush tomato really is not going to be very suitable for that sort of setup. I might get 2 bush tomato plants, for example, under a single large grow light. I might end up harvesting a couple of pounds worth of tomatoes off that in value, and spending substantially more than that on the grow lights, and using then that grow light space, sort of occupying that grow light space with effectively a low value crop when I could be growing something much healthier and more expensive and more suitable really for growing under grow lights in winter. So no, I wouldn't do it. But what I do instead is I do start my early tomatoes in February, pot them on a couple of times, plant them into hanging baskets at the beginning of April and put them in the heated greenhouse in April, and then only using grow lights when they're in pots and they're relatively small plants, and so that is quite cost effective, and ideally they're using the grow lights that I've got in the conservatory, and I'm only topping and tailing the day, so they're on for a few hours in the morning, then it's natural light during the day, and then for a few hours in the early evening, and then they move outside in April, as I say, into the greenhouse high up in hanging baskets where it's nice and warm and there's the maximum amount of daylight, and they don't have any more grow lights from April onwards. And we do get a nice crop of tomatoes in May by doing it like that, and that is cost effective. I've worked it out, I've done the numbers. I don't like to do anything unless it actually is cost effective. As a general rule, I have never spent any money on the allotments or the kitchen garden, the greenhouse, or grow lights or anything else that I spend on gardening that I haven't earned already from savings in the food bill many times over. So he then goes on to ask about cucumbers. I think these are cucumbers even more tricky, even more susceptible to disease, for example, to overwatering, to underwatering, just a really challenging crop to grow over winter. I find that they're even a challenging crop to grow even in October and early November, for example. I've lost as many as I've successfully grown that late in the year. So I definitely wouldn't grow them over winter. I do cucumbers early for a harvest in May. I've done them in the conservatory, but they take a lot of effort to get the watering right in the conservatory because it gets so hot during the day. We often go on holiday in April and May when the cucumbers are at the most tricky for watering, and I wouldn't want the kids to have to do that. So I've given up growing them in the conservatory, but I now do pretty much the same as I do with tomatoes. I start the cucumbers probably in February. They're then ready. They then go into containers in the conservatory for a month or so, and then about middle of April, something like that, then it's warm enough in the heated greenhouse for them to go in there, and they just get natural daylight and they're fine, and again we get a harvest in about May, early June sort of time. So yeah, I just think overwintering fruits for a harvest in winter, it just isn't worth it. unless you're really passionate about growing and money's no object. So Julie asks, why do you keep your raised beds covered up? And so what she means is that I've got cold frame tops and low tunnels over my beds over winter, and some of them have the covers over all year round. They're covered because they've got plants in them. They've all got plants in them all year round, and we're harvesting them all year round. And the covers are providing a lot of additional daytime heat. They're protecting leaching of nutrients out of the soil through excessive rain. They're keeping the moisture levels in the beds at the optimum level rather than the beds being completely saturated. They're reducing things like algal growth and reducing the population of slugs and snails. And they're providing protection from the wind, and they're heating the soil. So that's when we come out of winter and into early spring, when I'm planting all my spring crops like my cauliflowers, my calabrese, turnips, radishes, lettuces, spinaches, Asian greens, all that. Then they're all going into relatively warm ground, optimally hydrated ground, and so they grow away like crazy. And so that's why I do it. And she then goes on to say, I have raised beds with mice living in them. Trying to figure out how to deal with this. Would covers like yours help? Almost certainly not. I think the mice would just love living under those plastic covers. And you're better off using a mouse deterrent, something that the mice don't like the smell of, or mouse traps. Martin asks, tomatoes for suckers. Last couple of years I've tried letting each plant grow a decent sized sucker, then nipped it off, rooted it, and have found it works. And it also gives me a slight head start on a seed germinated plant, and there seems to be no worsening of fruit on the parent plant or the suckered plant. Is this something you've tried? Is it worth it for you? It is something I've tried. I really like it. I think it's a great thing to do, especially for expensive tomato seeds. In particular F1s. So buy a small packet of F1s, 6 seeds or something like that for my early plants. Take suckers off those early plants, root those, use those plants for my main crops. Take suckers off the main crops in, say, July, and root those, and then use those for my late crop tomatoes. So I think it's a great technique. As I say, I use it all the time, and it's a brilliant technique, as I say, especially for F1 hybrids, which obviously don't breed true seed wise, but the suckers are fine. And let me look for another good one, a quick one. Do you ever want to take a break from gardening? Not really. Well, occasionally I do. I mean, the thing is, I don't spend a lot of time gardening. I garden for about 10 hours a week. And I spend another couple of hours doing YouTube videos, and another couple of hours sort of writing my book and my newsletter and things like that. So if you top everything sort of gardening related up, it's probably 16 hours a week or something like that. That isn't a huge amount of time. It's a lot less than that in winter and early spring. It's a lot more than that in summer. Well, not a lot more, but maybe as much as 20 hours or something like that in summer. So I have loads and loads of time to do all my other hobbies and take care of the grandkids and do DIY and all that sort of thing. So I never feel it's like an overwhelming sort of responsibility to garden. And in winter, I'm generally on the allotment on a day like today. It's beautiful, sunny day, crisp. It's just a beautiful place to be. And if the weather's not very nice in winter, I'm not here. So I don't feel it's a drag. Occasionally harvesting can be a little bit of a drag, but I've got better at that. And I've got a little bit of everything in the kitchen garden and a little bit of everything sort of in the polytunnel. So even then, when the weather's really foul, we can still pick enough to see us through without me sort of having to harvest in the pouring rain and gales and things like that. I do occasionally like get a little bit worn down in sort of like the end of May, early June, something like that. But what I found is, in order to sort of combat that weariness, because of just a lot of sowing and a lot of pricking out and a lot of planting and a lot of watering during that sort of phase of time, I just kind of embrace gardening during that sort of 6-week period, and set my other hobbies aside a little bit and just sort of really just enjoy gardening to the maximum. And so I'm not as rushed because I'm not doing my other hobbies. And yeah, and then as soon as we kind of get through that point in June or something like that, I'll be back to hiking and cycling and things like that, and the gardens will kind of look after themselves a lot more. So I think I'll leave it there. I've got a lot more questions to answer, and yeah, please do sort of drop additional questions in down below, and I'll see if I can get to them next week. Anyway, my name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.